coming back for more. Thanks very much, Johnny.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris, and welcome to everyone to the second episode of our digital series. The purpose of this really is to ensure ICMP is providing the best information on top topics for MPAs and for companies, all the way from Australia to America. I want to start with a big thanks also to our tiny team here with Özlem Arksoy and Almudena Velasco, who've meticulously planned this series through several weeks under some of the most testing of circumstances. So we all owe a debt of thanks to them for setting this up. And also to our colleagues at Universal Production Music for providing the lively music in the last half an hour or so. Just scrolling through the list here, it's just fantastic to see so many countries represented. The last time I think we had more than 30 countries at the previous episode. And I see not just music publishing professionals, but colleagues from labels, societies, public authorities, WIPO, etc. So great to see. A warm welcome to each of you on the end of so many lines. The context, today's topic is about live streaming. There's nothing new under the sun, they say, or perhaps there is. All the data demonstrates that live streaming is a growth area of the industry. More than 45% growth figures in just March to April alone. More importantly, it's a vital vehicle for delivering new and live music from musicians' homes and halls to music lovers worldwide. In these times of COVID, where the commercial harm to the music sector is projected in France to surpass 4 billion euros, Germany 4 to 6 billion, and Japan 3 billion, it's hopefully providing a resilient revenue stream for creators and publishers alike. From pop stars as diverse as Nick Cave and Billie Eilish, to techno wizards Bicep and Caribou, to the Berlin Philharmonic, everyone's at it today. So here to discuss whether this is a new tool or whether we're just seeing a change in supply and demand, we have some of the finest in the business across music publishing, labels and collective management. I'm delighted to welcome Helen Smith, Executive Director at Impala, the trade body for indie labels, and a constant colleague in the copyright trenches with ICMP in Brussels. Impala's voice really is heard wherever policy and music meet in Europe. So we're delighted to have you joining today, Helen.
Oh, thanks very much, Johnny. It's great. It's great to see this as part of your priority subject for the digital series. Great topic.
Very welcome. Hopefully the combination of an Irish and a Scottish accent won't befuddle too many people over the next hour. I'd also very much like to welcome Dr. Tobias Phelpsmiller, one of the most respected legal minds, frankly, in our industry. He's General Counsel for Dmca, one of the EU's largest CMOs, with almost 8% growth this year, and for Germany accounting for 8.6% of collections globally. Tobias also has been a fantastic colleague through the lobby to protect copyright in Europe, and we're very, very grateful to have your expertise today, Tobias. Welcome.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for having me. So I'll add the German accent to the confusion. I'm really looking forward to this discussion because we've been flooded with requests for concert live streaming this year, obviously, like a lot of you may have. And there's so many legal questions arising around this topic. So it will be a fantastic opportunity to discuss this with you.
Super. Thank you, Tobias. We also have Scott Farrant, Head of Global Publishing Operations at Kobalt, ICMP Global Board Director, and one of the sharpest minds on rights, royalties, and metadata and licensing in the modern music market. Warm welcome to you, Scott.
Thanks, Johnny. Much appreciate being here. And a big thanks to ICMP. I mean, you guys work tirelessly on our behalf. I think it's interesting with the doom and gloom of COVID. Live streaming is one of those silver linings that's coming out of this sort of dark time. So it's a great discussion to be having. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Scott. We look forward to hearing from you. We have Shannon Sorenson, Vice President, Legal and Business Affairs over at the NMPA, our National Trade Body Association in the US. Shannon's at the forefront of defending music publishers' interests in the world's largest music market, and she's a constant source of counsel and cooperation with ICMP. Warm welcome to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Johnny, and thank you to the rest of the ICMP team for putting these together. Happy to be here. Yeah, just as you said, Johnny, NMPA represents music publishers in the US. We do that both in front of Congress and in litigation against bad actors. We negotiate settlement agreements, and we also negotiate model licenses. So this is an area where we've gotten a lot of questions over the last couple of months, and happy to be here.
Great, thanks very much, Shannon. Gustavo Menendez, delighted to welcome you, Gustavo, and to see you again. President, Latin America and US Latin for Warner Chappell Music. Gustavo is responsible also for Warner Chappell's US Latin business as well too. So he straddles both regions and has a great perspective in that regard. And frankly, there's few people who have better insight in one of the world's fastest growing music regions in Latin America. Good to see you, Gustavo. Welcome. You're just on mute at the moment, and just as a technical point for all panelists, I would encourage you just to stay off mute so that we can keep the discussion lively. So.
I promise I won't do that again. And again, thank you, Johnny, and thanks for ICMP for the invitation. I think this is a very important conversation as live streaming keeps evolving, and we've seen the results, and we all hope that this is going to be a business that it's going to keep evolving. So conversations like this, I think, are key.
Fantastic. Well, I think everyone, all of our attendees can see we've got a great spread here across the industry, across different sectors and different geographies. A few housekeeping points, if I may. Please, for the attendees, make the distinction between the Q&A box and the chat box. You can chat away to your heart's content there, but if you wish to ask a question to the panel, please do so in the Q&A section, and our team in Brussels will tackle that. I would ask you to simply state your name, your organization, your question, of course, and whom you're addressing if you're not addressing the entire panel. So just that Q&A. We will also like to keep questions coming throughout the session as opposed to stacking them at the end. So don't hold back if you have a question or query as we go along. We will try to unmute you as well too as you ask your question, so you can do it yourself over the microphone. And if that doesn't work, we'll simply read it out. So without further ado, what's a live stream? Anyone? Legally, practically, commercially? Perhaps we should start with legal mind, a lawyer. Shannon, what is a live stream?
Yes, so colloquially, live streaming is just any live event online. Live performances, like even this panel that we're doing right now is a live stream because we're doing it in real time. But typically what we're referring to when we're talking about live streaming in the music licensing context is things that involve music. And those streams can be both audio only or more commonly audio visual. So including a video component that covers a range of things from more casual types of live streams like an Instagram live or a Facebook live where you might be playing music with just you and your guitar, or it also covers live stream concerts. And as we're seeing with COVID, more high produced type of live events. And yeah, so it really just covers a range of things. And I mean, for our purposes, live streaming doesn't always include music, but the ones that concern us are the live streams that use music.
Great, thanks very much, Shannon. Maybe Tobias, could we have your perspective as well too? Is this something new we're seeing, or how do you see it legally?
Well, I think that was a pretty accurate definition of what live streaming is, but I think the most interesting legal questions arise when you try to distinguish it from other forms of exploitation. So where does live streaming start and where does broadcasting end? How much interactivity would you allow for a live stream as opposed to music on demand? Are you allowed to pause the stream? Are you allowed to restart the stream from the beginning once the event has started? So I guess those are the really tricky issues around the definition of live streaming. And this is also the questions that we're looking at the moment.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Maybe we can delve into that a little bit further down the line about broadcast and digital, of course, which is such a crucial distinction. Helen, how do you see live streaming? How would you define it? You're on mute currently. There we go. The big red button. There we go.
Sorry. I'm obviously clueless when it comes to live streaming. So I think the definitions that we've heard are accurate in terms of the legal approach. Certainly within our community, really live streaming's been around for a very long time. We talk about live streaming of concerts, festivals, but obviously in the last year, it's really 2020 has been the real takeoff. We've seen a real acceleration in terms of live streaming. So for our members, it's basically any event that takes place live over the internet because our artists can't get on the road. I mean, that's how I think you would explain it to a layperson.
Yeah, indeed. It's something of a lifeboat at the moment for creators and artists of all kinds. Gustavo, what's your perspective, if I may ask, from Latin America or more broadly?
On live streaming in general or a specific question?
Define it. Do you see it as a new emerging form of delivering content? Do you see it as a stream is a stream is a stream? Or how do you see it?
Well, it varies from country to country. We don't see the same thing happening, for example, in Brazil as is happening in Mexico. And it has to do a lot with what the artists, writers want to do, and also the response from the public in general. But no, definitely not a stream is not a stream or a stream. There's other issues, and I'm sure we're going to touch on it in rights, like sponsorships and things like that, that make the conversation a little bit more complicated, if I may say.
Great. Well, I think that's a perfect intro to you, Scott. Always a good thing simple. How do you view this area?
Always great to go last when people have made sensible comments beforehand and taken all the points. I think live streaming is essentially, it's another extension of digital music consumption. And so, as I say about COVID, it's one of the silver linings. I mean, this is another silver lining. One silver lining we've seen with digital music consumption extending has been, say, keep fit. But of course, with live offers that sort of immediacy and spontaneity that you only really get from that live. So it's in that respect, it's very, very important. I think it's also not really a homogenous item. I think we're seeing like the convergence of various areas, and we're seeing things like gaming with Twitch that's had live streaming for some time. We're seeing commentary, even people commenting on commentary, watching a live event and commenting on that live event. We're being given a sort of an additional view into the creation. So creators are letting us into their world so we can see what they're doing, how they're making their music. We've already got large platforms like YouTube and Facebook that already host a variety of live content. We've got cyber concerts that are dedicated, things like, what happening on Fortnite. And then, of course, we've got the sort of replacement of the traditional live promoters, which I think there we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. I think once we're out of COVID and we're back into normal live, I think we're going to see a massive explosion of the sort of like the last night of the show, the last night of the tour will be a live streamed event. And I think we'll see that really explode. So all of these things are converging into a single bucket we're calling live streaming.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And again, we encourage any panelists to come in at any point. You mentioned about Twitch and YouTube, and the numbers are staggering. Twitch is the viewership has grown 524% in the last 6 months alone, averaging now 574,000 a month. So it's kind of the, similar to what we saw with TikTok a couple of years ago. But also then looking at the numbers of audiences, BTS recently in August had a concert where they grossed more than £14 million, as it was a huge audience of almost 80,000. So the numbers are really quite impressive. If I may, before we come to the market side, let's just focus on the rights. And I know we could really get into the weeds here, and there's no global answer, so to speak. But which rights are involved in taking, if I'm a user, if I want to engage in live streaming, what's involved? How do I get a license? Do I need a different kind of license? Mechanicals, performance? For a layperson like me, how do those rights break down?
Is that open to anyone to jump in on?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think one thing we should do is we should recognise that first and foremost, live streaming is a digital usage. So, as you know, there are various areas converging, but it is its own usage, and it's a digital usage. It's not a live concert usage. So, in the same way that say SVOD wasn't rental or AVOD wasn't TV, streaming wasn't radio, downloads are not CDs. All of these things. They may do some cannibalization across the markets or may have some reference points to each other, but it's in and of itself a unique event. So it's a digital usage. I think in terms of it being a digital usage, I think we need to recognize that there are performing rights involved. There are mechanical rights involved. If there's a visual element to the stream, there's clearly a potential for there being a synchronization right involved. I think that's going to come down to a lot of individual jurisdictions about whether there's, it passes the certain criterion tests for whether it's a synchronization. But I think it's clear that if there's any form of pre-recording or any catalog behavior after the event, that automatically requires some form of synchronization license. And then I think the fourth one that also needs to be recognised is the moral rights. Because if there's sponsorship or branding involved, we all know and work with creators and how they hate to be appropriated and have things that they don't agree with associated with their names, like certain corporations or politics. So I think that, to me, as long as we fix on the fact it's digital, I think a lot of this will become easier as we go along.
Great, that's very helpful, Scott. Anyone else like to jump in on the panel on those thoughts?
Yeah, I can add to that. I think Scott really covered it, but the important thing to remember is there's a couple of different players. So platforms need to be licensed and often get licenses for performance and things like that. But to the extent that this is now really extending to lay users, I think it's important that we make an effort to educate people about what rights they need to obtain. So if you're ever going to pre-record a concert and post it online, you absolutely, at least under US law, but you absolutely need a sync right for the video that you've made. You need a performance right, or the platform may have a performance right for the live broadcast of the song. And then to the extent that it's available later, if it's archived or if people can access it later, that would require a reproduction license. So there's a couple of different rights implicated based on exactly what's involved in the live stream. But on all fronts, live streaming absolutely requires a performance license. End of story, period.
Yeah, and maybe if I may add to this, and this is also the wave of requests that we've been seeing from the beginning of this year, because people were in the position they had already basically purchased the license for the concert, and then the concert were cancelled. So people will come to us and say, well, could we transform the license for the concert into a streaming license? Because otherwise we have to call the entire thing off. So the only thing we can do is host it as a live stream. And I think that is the complicated part that we had to deal with over this year, how to maintain the value that we already attracted from the concert, and then transform the license into something that is legally not the same, but in the end, it's just a substitute, as Scott has pointed out, for the live event that never took place. That might be different in other areas of live streaming, but this is the phenomenon that we had to deal with over this year.
Only if I may just jump in, I think that the costs and the planning that go into a live stream are such that I don't think anybody who does this does it with the view that the live stream is the beginning and the end of the exploitation, as it were. The chances are that virtually everybody will think that there's going to be an afterlife for their live stream. So even if you were to talk about a narrow basket of rights that just pertain to the live stream, the other rights are implicated because the promoters have almost certainly got subsequent revenue in mind, and that's when the additional rights or the entire basket of rights are bound to be triggered.
You could even tell from the quality of a live stream if it's if someone has put a lot of money in it, your different cameras, angles, and this is also when you approach the area of the sync right, obviously, because then it comes close to TV production, and then I think you're definitely talking about the entire family of rights we've talked about.
I just want to clarify, though, that a sync right is always required if there's an audiovisual component and something is made beforehand, regardless of the quality. Of course, production value may increase the value of that stream or the degree to which people want to access it later. But to the extent that it is being fixed in some file or some format and it has a video component, whether a lot of production value went into that or not, you still need to get a sync license for that. And I think it's important to recognize that this doesn't exactly replace concerts. I know that it kind of has taken the place of concerts in the era of COVID where we can't see things live, but a live concert is limited in certain ways. You don't have a full broadcast of it or a full recording of it later to watch back from the comfort of your couch. You don't have the kind of unlimited audience that you can have with an online stream. So I think it's important to make sure that the way that we're licensing these adequately reflects the added value that that making, you know, a video on demand provides to audiences and to a much broader audience than would otherwise have been able to see something just in person.
Please go.
Just contribute just an anecdotal observation on the synchronization front. Something that sort of like was a huge faff and pain was when we were moving from terrestrial television to the VOD world. And I'm thinking back to, say, the UK or other territories where national broadcasters had typically taken a synchronization license for, say, 2 national broadcasts. They didn't have the necessary rights cleared to then transfer the entire catalogues over onto digital platforms. And that was a real delay into the digitalization and getting that material out into consumers' hands, and in some ways contributed further to piracy, because if consumers can't get things in a legal manner, they'll start looking for them in an illegal manner. So it helped us to sort of create this rucking the carpet to, you know, make a problem for ourselves further down the line by saying, oh no, there's no sync, we don't need to clear it. And then we say, actually, we want to move all this stuff onto a catalogue and have it on a platform. Oh, now we need to think about the sync licenses. We should, you know, do something sensible up front, knowing what's likely to happen in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, in a way, there's a little bit of a misnomer about the name live streaming. The presumption by many outside the industry in particular are that it's a live event happening at that particular moment, which isn't available thereafter or hasn't been pre-produced, when in fact a large majority are not quite fitting that actual definition. Helen, I'm just wondering, are your member companies on the label side, I mean, how do you view this growth area, and are you having any problems licensing? How do you view it in general and from the label's perspective?
Yeah, well, from our members' perspective, we got a lot of queries during the crisis about, you know, how to approach the situation. And in some ways, we were quite surprised because it is not a new phenomenon. You know, for labels, they've been doing live streaming agreements as part of concerts and festival work for many years. But I think from their perspective, it was new in the sense that, you know, there was this feeling that live streaming was becoming the center of the music sector, because everyone practically, certainly during the first confinement, had put their release schedules on hold, and artists were performing. So how do we work all that out? So what we did was we brought out some guidance for members in June. And, you know, we have a checklist so that all labels can see, okay, these are the types of questions that they need to look out for. And generally our members are, you know, really, I think, really excited, because the pandemic has actually been an accelerator to open new doors, and will really bring forward a whole new area of practice that opens lots of new doors. So for our members, it's a real mix of something that they totally embrace, and at the same time they want to be sure that, you know, for the reasons that Scott was flagging, that, you know, we look at this in the same way as we do, you know, normal business. So what's the long-term perspective here? Are we going to include any kind of you know, mechanical rights? Are we going to be looking at this? Are we going to be registering these tracks? Do they need an ISRC code? You know, should they be part of our normal repertoire? And that way we can secure revenue for our artists in the long term. So that's it's like, you know, a normal part of our marketing and partnership with our artists, really.
That's great. Thanks very much, Helen. If I might just pause there, we have a very good question now from James Jackson. Perhaps if one of our team, Medina or Özlem, could even unmute James, I think he can ask his question over the mic. We'll just give a few seconds to see if that's possible.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, James. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. I had a question regarding, there seems to be, because in America at least, data is king and the MLC is coming, and you say that over 3 or 4 times and you can hear the music in the background, the MLC is coming. But at any rate, I was wondering, there seems to be several startups springing up all over the place. There's a company called Sound Charts that has fantastic data. And there are a few other companies out here that are doing the similar things. And I'm just wondering what the effects of streaming and how the labels and publishers and attorneys are using this information. Most of these companies now have all of the information online. I mean, the ISRC numbers are there. We're getting into a world now, it seems to me, where there can be no, we're getting almost to transparency. So do you guys feel that the companies are embracing this? Will we start to see the global creative economy reaching down to the songwriters, producers, and artists and getting this money moved quicker or not? Just what do you think?
Thanks very much, James. Perhaps we can pass to yourself, Shannon, the US, and Gustavo. Scott, I think everyone will have a perspective here.
I mean, I certainly hope that that will happen, that things will move quicker and we can get money into the hands of the right people. Right now, what I'm seeing is that some of those, technology and data companies are being used by publishers to better track the use of their music across platforms. So you might get a usage report from YouTube, or you might get a usage report from TikTok, but those usages may not cover, say, usage, that may not cover any usage that's less than 20 seconds for a designated period of time. And I've been impressed when I've seen some of these technology companies and how well they can identify music with a short snippet. And I think that data will really empower publishers, or it should be able to empower publishers to know how their music is being used, so when they enter license negotiations, they have metrics to rely on. Granted, that's not available to everyone. There's obviously costs involved with that, but I think increasing transparency and tracking the use online is critical to achieving the correct value.
Yeah, to add to that, we're always looking for better ways and faster ways to pay our writers. Aside from whatever our system does, if we encounter any other company that has data that is worth, the whole idea is to use it to be in tracking, like Shannon said, as precise as you can. So of course, technology is something that is absolutely necessary. We're moving towards that at an incredible speed, and administration in per se is going to become more and more and more and more precise every time, and that is always the goal.
And I think at the same time, it's fair to admit that most of the live streaming actually takes place on platforms that have relatively poor reporting as opposed to services like Spotify. I mean, if you look at what you're comparing it to, platforms like Twitch and Facebook are nowhere near YouTube, let alone the Spotify in reporting quality. So we have a long way to go to get there. And it's also certainly the case that if you look at small scale concerts, cover version of original songs, then things get much trickier as opposed to like original artists singing their own songs, performing them on large stages, and then you record this live stream and you find it elsewhere on the net.
For me, just add, please.
No, I'm following up on Tobias' comment. In territories as huge, for example, as Brazil, small concerts, or almost like homemade concerts, are practically impossible to track. Of course, you can do a much better job on the massive shows, or where ticket companies are involved, or the usual good partners which we have a license and we have a good reporting, but it is very tricky. I mean, you get absolutely everything in the spectrum, for shows that are amazing and we can see revenue explode, to the impossibility to be in every single show that singer-songwriters, for example, wants to do. And not to change the subject, but for example, touching on the singer-songwriter thing, or in some instances, now we are 8 months into this whole thing, and live streaming has exploded and everybody's talking about it and it's super exciting and we all hope that it stays. But it's worth mentioning that in, at least in Latin America, in a few of those countries, the same writers or songwriters really took it kind of badly when they were told that they needed to obtain a license because they saw it as kind of like a tax on their own right to make some sort of money. Well, I write my own songs, I do my own show. I mean, there were no promoters, no sponsorships. So I don't know, I think it's super interesting where we started and where we are now, but everything happened in the middle.
Particularly when, if we look at March 2020, 7 of the 10 most viewed concerts online on YouTube were Brazilian artists. Just shows the market. Incredible statistic. Got to come in on that point with data.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we need to be aware of, I mean, Helen correctly pointed this out, there's sort of like an administration outside of things, and obviously James's question hits to the heart of that, which is in these new creations and on these live concerts, be they DJ sets or artists, there's going to be a certain amount of sort of merging of material. Where does one piece end? Where does another start? Do they get allocated a unique identifier in terms of a live concert, a unique identifier in terms of a unique recording? And those things are going to be tricky for us. I mean, at the moment, those data companies, there's multiple data companies, each holding their own versions of the truth. I mean, for example, we still as an industry don't have an authoritative link between a song and a recording, which I think is an outstandingly huge gap in our business. We can't reliably say that recording is that song. I mean, it's amazing. So I do think we are getting better, and all of our companies here, we all strive towards that. But I don't think we're in the sort of the golden home straight, as it were, so at the moment.
Indeed, but I think things are rapidly improving. One point you raised, Tobias, was in terms of the transparency and the data and so on. One of the most extraordinary things about Article 17, for example, in Europe, and certainly all ICMP members will have heard me bang on about this aspect, is that it's not just about copyright liability. Indeed, there's an obligation upon these platforms to be transparent back to rights holders. That's a game changer. That's an extraordinary change of the industry, whereby large platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, now need to be not just liable, but also reporting back in an accurate way. And I think certainly for Dmca and colleagues around the world, Tobias, that would be quite transformative. I think accompanying that legal change is the growth in the technology. We look around now, there's more than 70 different automated content recognition technologies available off the shelf around the world, and they're recognizing extraordinary amounts of music, and that's helping, of course, administration to improve and royalties to be paid faster and more accurately. To your point, Scott, I think our audience will be interested in RDX, the new system launched by the label side as well too, which is really cleaning up by shortening the distance between the rights holder and the platform with this new RDX system for direct licensing and use of metadata. So a lot of exciting things happening. If I may just move, Gustavo, you, of course, you're seeing an extraordinary market in Latin America with so many differences, as you mentioned as well too. We talk about the growth in Latin America being quite extraordinary. What challenges are you seeing in this area, in the region? Are there any issues with getting licenses done? Are there any issues with administration, with new broadcasters entering this field? How do you see the big sort of challenges in the near term?
Without getting into the weeds on how they happen and how each territory managed the licensing, I think the important thing is that we've seen all content licensed, either by, for example, the interesting thing is in Mexico, we have a one-stop shop, a digital one-stop shop. And to the point that this is digital use, everything is licensed through that one-stop shop. Mm-hmm. So you have that example, and in other cases, the license and the whole thing has been managed by the societies. And in Argentina, we have Sadaica as a PM society. So that, of course, is it. I think the important thing is there was a huge effort and conversations with the societies that everything needed to be licensed. Of course, we're going to keep on working on the details. hopefully improving everything. But I think that at least took care of the most important thing, that it is recognized that this is used, it needs to be paid, and it needs to be licensed. So we got that. Challenges, I think it's in the live streaming, the life of it. It could be it. I mean, one interesting thing is, for example, in Brazil, we talked about it, like this huge shows that had more than 3 million simultaneous viewers at a time. I mean, they were bigger than even the Andrea Bocelli show. But for example, in Brazil, that's almost completely sizzled out. People are already waiting, and shows are being sold for the true live shows. So we see the market kind of like going down. And in other territories, it moved completely to ticket companies being absolutely the leaders in the market. So it's completely changing. In Argentina, we have shows every single day. One other thing, I mean, of all sorts of types and sizes. So it's evolving. There's always going to be challenges, but I'm happy that in a short period of time, everybody, promoters, right holders, and kind of like got it together, and we were able to make it a viable business and get the money to the hands of our writers.
That's great. Thanks, Gustavo. I remember that Cali, the Colombian artist, he's been doing a lot of Instagram live cover gigs.
Yeah.
And they've been attracting live audiences of more than 5-6 million at a go, which is, and it obviously then leads to, well, what licenses are required for covers, etc. Shannon, just one mention there was about new entrants to the marketplace, whether that's venues or management and so on. Have you seen any interesting developments there, or are there difficulties with users getting licenses? What are your thoughts?
We don't get approached by as many venues and things like that. They typically will go to the PROs first and people who they have, these long-standing relationships with. But what we are seeing is obviously a boom in social media, and we are having some issues getting certain live, very, very big platforms like Twitch to get licensed. We do, in the US, obviously have the DMCA safe harbors, which, I think in the EU Article 17 is much better suited to kind of address these problems. But what's happening here is these platforms will not take a license and say affirmatively, well, we're covered under the DMCA, so we don't have to. So that I think we'll see play out over the next several months and years possibly, but we are having some challenges with platforms like that who have a huge component of their business is this type of use, but they get a hide, behind a safe harbor. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thanks, Shannon. Safe harbors, of course, a constant topic of our own discussions, but things again moving in the right direction. With that regard, Helen and Tobias, perhaps we've seen Article 17 not just with the data side, the liability side, but now we have notice and stay down, which again is a brand new tool in law. Do you think that that's compatible with live streams in that it might be useful for driving up value? Obviously, a lot of live streams are the principal source of the value of the license might be the exclusivity, so it's just live for a certain period of time. What are your thoughts on notice and stay down? Is that something which might be a positive for the music industry in Europe?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was a real game changer in certainly for the European legislator to confirm that it is absolutely essential to have notice and stay down, and it doesn't really mean anything if you can't have that. So in the live stream world, it's absolutely essential as well, because you cannot have value for a live stream in the same way as you can't really have value for anything else if it's constantly available or you can't control. So often it's not really so much about whether or not you want to take it down, but about being able to exercise some influence by making sure that your artists are able to say yes or no to a certain type of use, and obviously stay down is a fundamental part of that equation. So in Europe, it's a really important part of the directive, and the whole debate about where the directive's going now is really important as we see member states, roll out their national legislation. And it's great that a lot of countries are staying really faithful to the text of the directive.
Indeed, and
that's the most. We could go into a segue into another debate on that, but certainly, yeah, to answer the question, stay down's crucial in the live stream world.
Yeah, great. Just before maybe Tobias, I'd like to get your thoughts on that also. We have a question for you from an attendee, Yvonne Sill. Perhaps Amadina or Özlem, if we could unmute Yvonne for a question. And Tobias also, I think it's directed to yourself, if you might give us your thoughts on stay down as well too. Let's just see if we can get Yvonne on mic. Yvonne, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you, Yvonne.
Okay, hi all. Hello, Mr. Holzmüller.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you in this round. It was a bit, let's say, surprising that interactive live streams would fall under the category of linear streams to be licensed by GEMA. Maybe I just got you not correctly, and I would really happy if you could just give us a more definition, or even better, a list of examples what would be categorized as for linear and what would really be categorized as interactive but still be licensed by GEMA. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne, for this question, and it's a good opportunity to clarify what probably I haven't been able to make exactly clear. What I wanted to say is that we had a lot of internal discussions, and also with users, on where does linear streaming end and where does interactive use start. So obviously, as soon as you're able, or as the platform stores the link and you're able to access it at a later point once the show is over, we're not talking about live streaming anymore. We're talking about on-demand service. It is also clear to us, at least, but this is also where the discussion already starts, that once the show is still on, should you be able to jump back to the start, to restart? Let's say you started to watch the concert half an hour late. Could you jump back to the beginning, then watch the entire show, and then finally end the show 30 minutes later than the rest? This is where we say this is interactive. But there are other views in the market as well. And then there is a third feature that most services offer, and that is you can pause the stream while you were watching it in real time, and then you can continue from where you stopped as long as the show is still running, and also ending the show maybe 10-20 minutes later than the initial show or the original show is going. And this is what we consider still to be live streaming. This is the only interactive feature that we have accepted in our new tariff on live streaming as still qualifying as a live stream. I hope that was clearer than my previous statement.
Crystal, thank you, Tobias. Yes, if anyone on the panel else wants to come in on that question at all, any other perspectives?
Yeah, it's not quite the stay down conversation, but just in terms of the overall licensing approach, I think it's very, very important we get the right framework in place now, and we start in the right place in terms of the price setting, rates, and approach. We wouldn't want to get to like a fixed live streaming campaign 5 years from now, when you sort of take a retroactive view and say, oh no, we took the wrong approach. And again, I'm sorry to hark on, I'm going to say taking a digital view is the right approach. It's a digital usage, and that's what we should be doing. We should also be mindful of the difference between the territory of origin and territory of destination approaches. So in the way that, so in broadcast, what some broadcasters have managed to do is the territory of origin approach is managed to do forum shopping and find the cheapest place in a jurisdiction or in a geographical area to license from. We don't want a repeat of that. We need to not necessarily take a territory of destination approach in terms of the license being issued, but we need to be aware of the territory of destination in terms of where the price of the ticket is sold. You could almost call it a TOP, a territory of platform approach. because the multi-territorial digital service providers already have that approach with lots of their licenses, with rights holders around the world.
I agree with you, Scott, on the territoriality part, totally. I think when it comes to the calculation of rates, I still think live streaming is in many aspects different from all the other online exploitations, and there is a lot to be learned from concert tariffs in terms of what type of value you take as a basis for the calculation of your rate. You have ticket sales, you have donations, you have sponsoring. So we found that when trying to calculate the rates for live streaming, that there are a lot of ideas from concert licensing that can be taken into account as opposed to pure streaming services and music on demand services.
Well, yeah, I agree to a certain extent, but live streaming is something new. For example, tipping is a very large thing in live streaming, and we don't have tipping typically in our other areas of business. So when I say, live streaming is new, I mean, it is new in some respects. So we should be taking into consideration the revenue base for these conversations, should look at sponsorship, advertising, tipping, any and all forms of revenue that relate to that event. Perhaps setting aside merch, maybe Helen will probably jump on me and say, what? But I mean, joking aside, I think the revenue base we should look at a broad revenue base. I think that's somewhere we've been let down through a weak negotiation position against, say, some of the other older digital platforms where we haven't had an obligation to license and we haven't had stay down, which put rights holders in a very, very weak negotiation position. So we haven't been able to say, look at your broad revenue basis. We've been only looking at a very narrow revenue base, which is underestimating and underpaying all songwriters and artists.
Yeah, I think that applies. Go on. I was just going to say, Shannon, I think it applies across the digital world generally, doesn't it? Really, we when we look at licenses with platforms, are we sure all the relevant revenues in there? It's you never really know for sure what's covered in your basket, and more transparency in that respect is really helpful. Shannon.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that I see the value, as Tobias is saying, in taking live concert formats and looking at the pricing for those when coming up with pricing for online concerts. But I think you absolutely have to recognize that the rights involved are different. When you are live with an audience in a concert hall, you may need a performance license and you may not need anything else. But when it comes in a different format, regardless of how analogous that is, there are new rights that are implicated, and it's very important, especially for music publishers and songwriters, to make sure that reproduction right is accurately licensed and is accurately paid for.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting it should be sufficient to take a performance license. What I was saying is that you can learn from concert licensing that you take beverages, you take, camping costs, you take all types of revenue streams that are normally not attached to digital licensing into account. And this is what we can learn from this type of performance licensing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Great. If I may just move to another topic slightly. This is as close as we may get to a yes/no potential answer. It comes from Philip Thirlway. So as Lemon Amadena, if we can unmute Philip to ask his question.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you, Philip.
Great, thanks. So the question's with regard to sync licenses, which obviously came up at the start of the discussion. I'm interested to hear the panel's thoughts on live streams which take place on sites which are actually already licensed by societies or publishers to include a visual element, so sites like YouTube. If you had a stream by an artist doing their own material on their own channel, could that be considered a user-generated content, or do you think a sync license would still be required?
Any takers? Thank you, Philip.
I just want to clarify the question. if an artist is doing a YouTube live on their own with their own music, you're asking if they still need a sync license?
Exactly. On a user uploaded content platform such as YouTube.
It probably just depends on what exactly is the content of the platform's license. With something like YouTube, they typically take a pseudo sync license or a reproduction license on behalf of their users. And I think that that's a model that we should probably be looking at for other smaller platforms. But that aside, if the platform has a sync license, then the user themselves is typically covered under that.
Yeah, and it also has to do with the different legalities in country by country. For example, in the US, in YouTube, there's always a sync license present. For example, in Latin America, there's not. YouTube gets licensed in a different way, but there's never a conversation on sync. But if the concert is his own songs and doing everything, for example, I don't see it.
I think an important perspective is, sorry, Scott, if I may just say that within the Article 17, again, sorry to go back to Europe, but one paragraph there is 17.2, which says that the user themselves are covered within the terms and scopes of the license agreed between the platform and the rights holder. And that's a really great thing because it really demystifies who's liable and really gets away from perceiving that in any shape or form the user should be the one who is infringing, rather the blanket between the platform and the rights holder is really what should be covering most, if not all usages. Sorry, Scott, you wanted to come in on that?
Actually going to say something very similar to that, actually, Johnny. I was going to say that the commercial arrangement between the rights owner and the platform will stipulate what type of usage is covered and what sort of synchronization is covered, whether what's true UGC, what's commercial, what's branding, sponsorship, etc. So the specifics would need to be understood, but I'm kind of saying the same thing as you, Johnny.
Yeah, and with stay down with that, artists will be able to see these kinds of platforms as legitimate, great ways to get content out there and make sure it doesn't repeat. And that's a great way of driving value for everyone concerned. I think, Tobias, you had a point on that, perhaps?
No, I fully agree. I think as long as you're acting not in a commercial capacity, you can be relatively certain that your acts might be covered by the upload of on the platform by the rights holder's license, as long as you don't touch moral rights. If you act in a commercial capacity, that might be different. That requires a closer look.
Great. I'm very conscious of time, guys. There's a lot of people tuning in from around the world, different time zones. So I think we're going to look to wrap it up in and around there. I'm really extremely grateful, not just for your time, but for your expertise to all of you on the panel. We get to work with you day in, day out on a bilateral basis, and bringing this kind of expertise and information to such a wide audience is really fantastic. So I want to say a big earnest thank you from everyone involved here in the audience side, to each of you, Tobias, Gustavo, Helen, Shannon, Scott, great to see you, and thank you very much indeed. We have a little carousel, some data that we just wanted to highlight to the audience of different forms of live streaming, and perhaps we can just share the screen there by Amadena and Özlem. So if everyone wants to hang around for a couple of minutes, we'll try and get that going. Murphy's Law says that technology won't work, but we'll try our best. And what we will do is we'll circulate to all registered attendees some of the data points and some of the key findings from this discussion. Fascinating one, lots to talk about. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with the team at ICMP. That's secretariat at ICMP-CIEM.org, or you can follow us on Twitter. Hopefully Amadena or Özlem might be able to share the screen just to show us out.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
To everybody.
Good to see you all. Okay, so I think we have just some slides here on the digital forms of exploitation. If I may just scroll through here and a distance here to Amadena. So yeah, this is some of just the who, what, and the data involved in live streaming. Perhaps on the who, first of all. We're seeing various different forms of live streaming, of course, growing, but I think really what's novel and new here are some of the search engine databases. We're seeing mobile apps being dedicated to live streaming, whereby you can find live stream concerts, both available on demand or planned for one time only. And of course, we're seeing a lot of the standard DSPs reaching into this area, whereby they're databasing and resourcing and library live stream performances. So that's a very interesting, I think, new development. Certainly we can agree that. In terms of the what different types of live streaming, we can just give some examples here. You know, we've gone really into the legalities today, but I think that we can see that live streaming, as Scott mentioned, covers digital usage in most forms, whether that's a live performance from a venue or a home, whether it's a pre-recorded audiovisual live concert. Nick Cave did that very successfully a couple of months ago from the Ali Pali in London. We mentioned BTS, who had more than 1 million for their concert in August. But also we're seeing big bands with lots of back catalogs, such as Metallica, putting repositories on big platforms like YouTube. So you can be able to go there and go through past performances and access them on demand. And of course, then we have the actual ticketed simultaneous concerts. They're sometimes paid, they're sometimes free. And that might be, in the colloquial or terms or layman's terms, the closest thing we might suggest to a live stream when you see a concert as it's happening or pre-recorded. Some of the data points that we have seen across this, and again, we will share it afterwards, are really quite extraordinary. We're not used to seeing these kinds of figures. And we're really seeing here 67% of fans who watched a live stream purchased a pay-per-view tickets to a similar next gig. I think that's incredible and shows the appetite for music lovers for this kind of usage, hence getting the infrastructure right so important. We can see also for artists, it's also a very rewarding factor. We can see there that on YouTube, a Japanese artist, Rail, he was able to gross $130,000 for a one-off live stream gig. And we're looking at projections here by end of year this year of growth of more than 45%. 45% that was during the early lockdown, and end of year growth will double that. So a fascinating area. We want to say thanks to everyone involved, and we look forward to seeing you at our next digital series event, which will be on the MLC. That's next Thursday. Shannon, you no doubt have that in the diary to tell us all about it, and we look forward to having your colleague there to join us, Daniel Aguirre. This is the panel. We have the Chief Executive of the MLC, Chris Arendt, Daniel Aguirre from the NMPA, Alisa Coleman, AIMP, and also Chief Operating Officer and on the board of the MLC, and Bart Herbison, who's from the Nashville Songwriters Association. So another fantastic panel, 5 p.m. next Thursday. We'll hope to see you there. Thank you very much indeed.